So I think it's good we start with Surah al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, maliki yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صدق الله العلي العظيم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. ما بعد. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم منا جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقينا وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد منا لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Peace be upon you, O Aba Abdullah, and upon the souls who have gathered in your courtyard. Upon you from us all is the peace of God forever, for as long as we remain and as long as night and day endure. And may God never make this our last pledge to visit you. Peace be upon al-Hussein, and upon Ali, the son of Hussein, and upon the children of Hussein, and upon the companions of Hussein. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, 8 nights we've walked, and we've recovered the word. Shahada means witness. We traced its lineage from Abel, peace and blessings be upon him, through the prophets, through the Ahl al-Bayt to a plain in Iraq. We learnt the theology of Shaheed Mutahhari's 5 kinds of death, the sociology of Dr. Shariati's Shahada of the tongue and Shahada of the life. We honored the Christian neighbor, the secular revolutionary, the anti-colonial cause, the seductive atheist aesthetic of the cherry blossom, and the 72 whose loyalty was to God and to the truth, not to a flag or an emperor. 8 nights of building. Tonight we draw the line. Not what is Shahada. We've built the answer over 8 nights. Tonight, what is not Shahada that calls itself Shahada? This is the corrective night. This is the night the Master of Witnesses, peace and blessings be upon him, requires of every preacher who claims his name, know the counterfeits and refuse to bless them. And it is the night I would rather not preach. Because tonight we will name practices that some in our own communities perform, claims that some in our own scholarly tradition have made, forms that some in our own century have come to mistake for the substance. But we will speak with a great gentleness, and I make a pact with you this evening. I will speak with firmness on the truth, and with gentleness, great gentleness on the people. The people who perform these practices are not enemies. They are loved by Imam al-Hussein and they are loved by us. Tabyeen, or clarification, is not the work of singling people out. It is the work of raising the level so that we walk together more clearly towards what the witnesses themselves were and are calling us toward. Firm on the truth and tender with the people. This is not my framing. It is the Qur'an's description of the Prophet's true companions in Surah al-Fath, the chapter of the victory, 40th chapter of the Qur'an, verse 29, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Muhammad is the messenger of God, and those with him are firm of heart against those who reject the truth, compassionate amongst themselves. Ashidda'u al-kuffar, rahama'u baynahum. Firm against falsehood, compassionate among themselves. Allama Tabatabai in Al-Mizan names the pairing as structurally theological. The second clause is meant to dispel the notion that hardness towards falsehood might entail harshness amongst themselves. Firmness with falsehood is not and must not be harshness with the people. Tonight we hold the dyad as God himself paired it. And the verse of course continues. You see them bowing down, prostrating themselves. Their marks are in their faces from the effect of prostration. Imam as-Sadiq, peace and blessings be upon him, was asked what mark this names, and he said, as-sahar fi salat, wakefulness in prayer. The mark on the believer's face is what consistent night prayer does to it over the years. Hold on to that point. We will return to this mark when we speak of the young Iranian named in honor of the first martyr of the Ahlul Bayt after the passing of the Prophet, who stood at the shrine of Imam al-Rida on the 21st night of the month of Ramadan and asked his mother to pray for his Shahada. The mark of prostration was on his face when ISIS or Daesh led him by the rope. That is the same mark that Imam al-Sadiq named. And God says in the same verse, this is their description in the Torah and their description in the Gospel. The dyad of firmness with falsehood and tenderness with the people is announced in the prophetic chain, in the law of Moses, in the Gospel of Jesus, son of Mary, and fulfilled by Prophet Muhammad and by the community of Prophet Muhammad. The same character of the true believer in every revealed book. That is the honor without conflation that we locked in session 5, Quranically grounded, prophetically continuous. A short cross-reference before we begin to the third night, 5 kinds of death. Just as modern culture has normalized certain criminal deaths by relabeling them, abortion as choice, assisted suicide as a mercy, so it too has normalized certain false martyrdoms by borrowing the word. It's the same theological move, the language of dignity laid over an act dignity does not bless. Tonight we name the move in its other direction. The language of witness laid over forms the witness himself would not have blessed. And so hold one word in your hearts for this entire night. And that word is hujjah, or proof. The hidden imam, may our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return, is al-hujjah, the proof. The 72 of last night were named by Sayyid Zainab, peace and blessings be upon her, as the loyalty to God himself, to the truth God revealed, and to her brother as the proof of that truth on the earth. They were hujjah in their bodies. And tonight, as I've said, you will hear the same word placed by Hajj Qasem Soleimani, may God rest his soul, on the throat of a young Iranian named Mohsen Hojaji, whose surname carries the HJJ root, the very root of the word hujjah, whose first name his mother gave him in honor of Mohsen ibn Ali, Mohsen the son of Ali, peace and blessings be upon him, the first martyr of the Ahlul Bayt after the passing of the Prophet. Hajj Qasem had said, Hojaji became a hujjah, a proof on how to live and how to die. And the martyr Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, sealed it by saying, Martyr Hojaji became God's proof before everyone's eyes. And of course, as always, the references are all in the write-up. The night sits between this proposition and a takeaway. A true witness is one who has become a hujjah. A counterfeit is what claims the word Shahada without the substance of hujjah. 3 movements tonight and a 4th that closes a road that we have been walking together for nights. Firstly, Shaheed Mutahhari's Catalogue, the methodology and the historical corruptions. Second, the 4 counterfeits walked out into our own century, the political, the ritual, the cultural, and for the first time in this series, the imperial. Between the second movement and the third, I will return us to the 4-stage road that we have been walking with one man since the third night, and I will complete, or we will get, God willing, complete that road. And then third, the 3 tests of true witness. And then the maqtal. And tonight, the maqtal is for the witness no counterfeiter can ever steal. The suckling infant in his father's arms. And so we move on to the verse for tonight. And the verse is from Qur'an, Surah al-Kahf, the chapter of the cave, 18th chapter of the Qur'an, verses 103 to 104, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Say, shall we inform you about the biggest losers in regard to works? Those whose endeavour goes awry in the life of the world, while they suppose that they're doing good. Listen to what God names. He doesn't say, the worst losers are those who knew they were wrong and acted anyway. He says, "The worst losers are those whose works have gone astray, while they themselves believe that they're doing good." The verse names the most dangerous category of human action, the sincere counterfeit. The takfiri who beheaded Mohsen Hojaji believed he was doing the work of God, and the captive at his feet was a murtad, an apostate, and the blade in his hand was an instrument of jihad. The kamikaze pilot whose letter we read last night believed he was offering himself for the emperor in a sacred act. The Tatbir practitioner whose blood soaks his clothes believes he is mourning the master of witnesses. The American president who signed the order to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki believed he was saving lives. The empire that invokes Amalek over Gaza believes it is fulfilling a sacred duty. Every counterfeit, by its very definition, is sincerely held, at least by the majority of the people. And this is what makes it dangerous. That is what tonight is for. Not to convict the counterfeiter of malice, but to teach the eye to see what the counterfeit is, even when its practitioner cannot. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the first of the points, which is the 3 tests, a preview. So before we walk into the 4 counterfeits, let's look at the criteria that we will apply to each and every one. 3 tests, and we will return to them in full at the end of this evening. First, is the witness in service of the covenant with God himself? Not a flag, not an ideology, not a self-image, not a state, but with God himself. Second, is the act consistent with the law God has revealed to his prophet? Peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions. And third, did the witness choose in full awareness of what that choice cost? Awareness, wakefulness, consciousness, as Shaheed Mutahari names it. 3 doors, 1 criterion underneath. We will apply them as we go. So firstly, the honest pulpit. Now the spine of tonight is a book. Actually 2 books by the same author, the martyred scholar Ayatollah Murtada Mutahari, may God rest his pure soul, whose blood was on the steps of his own university in Tehran in May of 1979. Tahrifat al-Ashura, misrepresentations and distortions in the rituals of Ashura, and Hamaseh Hosseini, the Hosseini epic. He wrote them not as an academic, but as a man who had heard the false sayings from too many pulpits. Listen to how Shaheed Mutahari names the disease, and the references are all in the write-up. He says, tahrif is an indirect blow and a stab in the back. Think about that choice of words. The distortion of Karbala has done more damage to the Shia of Imam Ali than every sword Yazid ever sent. Yazid killed 72 on a plane. The distorters have killed the lessons of Karbala in millions and millions of hearts who heard the story without ever being told what it was for. The discipline has 4 steps: honor, name, lift, and restore. Honor the love that produced the embellishment. Name where it came from. Lift it away from the canonical narration. And restore the witness to its actual integrity. Karbala does not need decoration. And the line we opened the series with on the very first night, Shaheed Mutahari's indictment of the pulpit, where he said, and I quote, "Most of the preachers who narrate the story of Karbala will call Imam Hussein the master of martyrs, and yet they have little analytical insight into the question of martyrdom. They describe the events in such a way as though he lost his life in vain." And like with everything, the references are all in the write-up. The disease of the pulpit Shaheed Mutahhari named at the start of our series is the same disease whose symptoms we catalogue tonight. In Tahrifat al-Ashura, he names 4 corruptions. First, the exaggerated narrations that contradict the Qur'an and authentic hadith, folkloric inflation. Second, the rituals that contradict Islamic law, bladed self-flagellation that injures the body and impedes the obligatory worship. Third, the reduction of Imam Hussein's witness to weeping without content, tears without theology, professional grief that flatters itself by its volume and never asks what the grief is for. And fourth, the fabricated saying that everyone knows, narrations whose first attestation is in a 16th or 19th century text. For example, Kashifi's Rawdat al-Shahada or al-Darbandi's Asrar al-Shahada, which we've mentioned previously. Now, we honor the love that produced these texts. We do not, in this setting, in this pulpit, teach their narrations as anything close to canonical. Shaheed Mutahhari named the disease of his own century. Tonight we ask the harder question. What does the disease look like in our century? The political claim, the ritual claim, the cultural claim, and the imperial claim. 4 counterfeits walked out into our time. Now, the first counterfeit is easy to name, almost impossible to argue out of once it has captured a young man's heart, because it speaks the holiest words our tradition has. ISIS or Daesh, Al-Qaeda, Jabhat al-Nusra, and other such organizations. The Takfiri network, the network that takes the takfir of the Muslim by the Muslim as its theology, and the suicide bombing of the mosque and the market as its tactic. They call their own suicide attackers, they call the deaths of their own suicide attackers istishhad. They label their captives as murtad, istishhad being martyrdom. They label their captives as murtad, apostates, and call the act of beheading them jihad, performed under the black flag bearing the Shahada itself. They use the same vocabulary, claim the same flag, invoke the same God that the Master of the Witnesses invoked. And everything they do means the diametric opposite thing to what Imam al-Hussein meant. The senior scholars of our tradition have already done the legwork. As we mentioned previously, the Society of Seminary Teachers of the Hawza of Qom on the 17th of February 2015, within 48 hours of the Takfiri beheading of 21 Coptic Christians on the beach in Libya, condemned the Takfiris by name and called their actions anti-Islamic. And we quoted the statement, I will quote it again, in the name, and the references in the write-up, in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. The Society of Seminary Teachers of the Hawza of Qom condemns the recent action of the terrorist group Daesh in the beheading of a group of Egyptian Christian citizens in Libya, and emphasizes that the only path of struggle against the terrorists of Daesh is the unity of the Islamic world. Such events will further disclose the anti-Islamic nature of the Takfiri agents and the full extent of their threat. And 5 days before, on the 12th of February 2015, the Hawza of Najaf had already spoken. Ayatollah Sayyid Ali al-Sistani, in his official document, Advice and Guidance to the Fighters on the Battlefield, in point number 6, says, and the reference again is in the write-up, do not accuse anyone of apostasy or heresy in their religion to justify shedding their blood, as the Khawarij and their modern followers do. Now listen to what the Najaf Marja'iyya has placed on the Takfiri network. The way of the Khawarij, returned in our age. The Khawarij, the sect that struck the commander of the faithful in the prayer niche in the mihrab of Kufa in the year 40 of the Hijrah. The Hawza of Qom has spoken, and the Hawza of Najaf has spoken. The Takfiri claim that the killing of civilians is the work of God, performed under the Shahada on the flag is rejected by every senior marja alive today. But we do not refuse this counterfeit only with rulings. We refuse it with a face. The figure who stands in the mirror against the Takfiri counterfeit, whose face the world saw on the very same day, was a young Iranian named Shaheed Mohsen Hojaji, a defender of the holy shrine of Sayyid Zainab at Damascus, captured at the Tanf border crossing in Syria on the 7th of August 2017, beheaded by ISIS or Daesh 2 days later. He was a mere 26 years old. His son Ali was 1 year and 4 months old, asleep in their home in Najafabad in Iran. And the well-known viral photograph, you can find it in the write-up. The calm face, the wounded right arm, the captor's hand upon his neck, the knife held just out of the frame, the black smoke billowing from the airstrike that broke the position, and in the center of it all, his eyes. And his wife, Zahra Abbasi, spoke about that photograph, and she said, and the reference again are all in the write-up, she said, "Look at my husband's eyes. There is no fear in these eyes at all. It is all bravery. It is daring. Mohsen in this photo is like a mountain, steadfast." Like a mountain, steadfast. The wife of a 26-year-old who had just been beheaded the week before, looking at the photograph the world has just seen, finds in his eyes not fear, but the mountain. That is the eye that is trained on Shahada. The Takfiris labeled Hojaji Murtad, apostate. They did not call his death Shahada. They reserved that word for their own. But they performed the killing as a religious act under their black flag bearing the Shahada itself, claiming the work of God in the destruction of the one we know was a witness for God. The world's eye on that day saw what Shahada actually looked like, and it was Hojaji's face, not the man holding the knife. The same word, but the opposite content. So let us now apply the tests. Test 1 fails. Loyalty is to sect purity, not to God. Daesh has a loyalty towards its own sect, its own faction. It doesn't have any loyalty to God regardless of what it says. Test 2 fails. The ideology, the deen, requires evidence and due process before a Muslim's blood may be shed. Or takfir declared on whim, without a trial, without proof, is precisely what Ayatollah Sistani named as the way of the Khawarij and their modern followers. Test 3 fails. The script is the systems, not the consciences. Counterfeit at all 3 doors. What Hajj Qasem Soleimani, may God rest his pure soul, said about Hojaji that day is the line that opens the door we walk through tonight. Again, hold that word Hujjat. We will return to it in a few moments. Now we come to a hard topic with love. The second counterfeit is harder than the first because it lives amongst us, in the homes of people who love Imam al-Hussein as much as you and I do. The practice, sometimes called blood mourning, Tatbir or Qamazani, with blades or chains or swords on the day of Ashura, until the clothes are soaked with the believer's own blood, this is not the practice of the Imams, peace and blessings be upon them. It does not appear in the biography of Sayyid Zainab, and she walked the captive's road from Karbala to Kufa, from Kufa to Damascus, then back to Medina. She had every reason in human history to mourn dramatically, but she did not do this. It does not appear in the worship of Imam Sajjad, Imam Zayn al-Abidin. It does not appear in any narration from any of the 12 Imams. The Prophet or Fatima al-Zahra, peace and blessings be upon them all. It entered our community in the late Safavid and Qajar period, 16th, 17th and 18th centuries, under specific cultural pressures that can be traced. The question is never what has always been done. The question always is, what is the practice of the family of the Prophet has left us as our has been left to us as our criterion. Across 100 years of Hausa scholarship, 4 voices, 4 generations, yet one principle. Firstly, you have Ayatollah Sayyid Mohsen al-Amin of Lebanon. He has written that the striking of heads with knives and the striking of the backs with iron chains is self-harm and therefore religiously forbidden. Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul, in his question number 37, for those interested, has said, if these acts cause disrepute to the school of thought, they are not permissible, and in any case, they should refrain from such acts. And in oral teachings, he named the practice Qamazani, which causes disrepute to Islam, performed the processions and the chest beating in a more dignified form instead. The references are all in the write-up. Then you have Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Sistani of Najaf, who has not issued a specific numbered answer specifically on Tatbir. But that pastoral abstention is itself wisdom. His universal principle is unambiguous. Whatever causes significant harm or causes disrepute to the religion and the school of thought is not permissible. His office has actually confirmed this principle does apply to Tatbir. And the binding hukm or edict of the martyred Wali al-Faqih, Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, which is carried forward by the current Wali Faqih, may God protect him, Imam Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei, is as follows. And it's indexed as question 1461. Again, the references are all in the write-up. Imam Khamenei writes, whatever of the mentioned matters causes harm to a person or causes disrepute to the religion and the school of thought, it is forbidden, and the believers must refrain from it. And it is not hidden how much in many of these matters, in these mentioned matters, brings ill repute and diminishment in the eyes of the people to the school of Ahl al-Bayt. And this is among the greatest of harms and the gravest of losses. 4 voices, 4 generations, one principle. The scholarly cover for this practice does not exist. But there is a second argument that closes this matter for any Shia who has ever sat at the feet of an honest speaker. A believer cuts themselves on the day of Ashura until their clothes are soaked with their own blood. That blood makes the clothes ritually impure. They cannot pray the obligatory Dhuhr or noon prayer in those clothes. They have performed a ritual and they have missed a key pillar of Islam. And here is the question that closes and ends this matter once and for all. What was the substance of Ashura? It was not the blood, it was the prayer. At noon on the 10th, in the heat of Karbala, with the swords of the enemies raining around them, Imam Hussein and his companions stopped, faced the Qibla, and they prayed. Sa'id ibn Abdullah al-Hanafi, one of the 72 that we honored last night in the Maqtal, took arrows in his back so that the prayer could be completed. That is what Ashura is all about. The standing mid-slaughter before God. Not the cutting of one's own head. If the form you are calling mourning Imam Hussein stops you from doing what Imam Hussein himself stopped to do, that form is counterfeit, irrespective of how bloody it might be. And I will tell you something that I watched in one of our own communities in around 2012. I'd spoken against Tatbir from a pulpit at a center, a primarily Pakistani and Indian congregation, and the reaction was angry. They were certain I had insulted them. And then on the day of Ashura, many of these same brothers performed the Tatbir. They were blooded. And exactly as the rulings predicted, they could not pray Dhuhr. The day whose substance was the prayer in the midst of battle, they missed the prayer because of a ritual they had performed in his name. And I have to say something harder, but with love. Tatbir done with sincere love is still navel-gazing love. It is an aesthetic of loyalty without the substance of loyalty. Last night, we said it about the kamikaze. The form looks like loyalty, but the content is the states. And the same architecture is at work in the bladed morning. And then the line, Imam Hussein does not need our blood. He has more than enough of his own and his family's and his companions. The master of martyrs has the blood of his brother al-Abbas, of his son Ali al-Akbar, of his nephew Qasem, of his nephews Aun and Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon them all, of the 72 sworn companions, and as we will hear in tonight's maqtal, of an infant in his own arms. He does not need ours. What he does need is for us to be like the 72, to be loyal to God himself and to the truth that God revealed and to the Imam that God appointed. And today, that loyalty is to the hidden Imam. May our souls be his ransom, may God hasten his return. And in his absence, to the Wali al-Faqih, Imam Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei, may God protect him, who holds his line until the appointed hour. The witness is not in the cutting. The witness is in the loyalty. And once more, let us apply the tests. So test 1, diverted. The form serves self-display. It does not serve God. Test 2, fails. A pillar of Islam missed for a ritual that the ideology, the religion, has never asked for. And test 3 fails. Sincerity without consciousness. Undoubtedly counterfeit. To anyone who has done this practice, we honor the love. The love is real. The master of witnesses certainly sees it. The blood you shed for Imam al-Hussein, if you turned it instead into the prayer he stopped to perform, into the worship he died to preserve, that is what the love is for. The form is what we adjust, but the love we must keep. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the third counterfeit, which is called the borrowed cross. So the third counterfeit walks in a different way. It does not live in a community. It lives in the air of our age. And we draw the line here with great care, because this is where the most confusion enters. The believer who keeps the photograph of Imam Hussein's maqam or shrine, or of Hajj Qasem, or of Shaheed Hojaji, or Sayyid Hassan, or whoever, on their phone or on their wall as a reminder, as the callback to the witness when the day is heavy, this is not the counterfeit. The master of witnesses is honored by the eye that returns to him. The counterfeit is when the photograph stops being a reminder of him and becomes a presentation of me. When the martyr's face on the profile picture is no longer for the martyr, but for the followers, no longer the remembrance, but rather the badge. So too with the visit to the shrine. The believer who travels to Karbala, to Najaf, to Mashhad, to Qom, to Damascus, etc., who walks the pilgrimage road with sore feet and a bleeding heart for the love of the Imam alone, this is one of the highest of acts. Ziyarah is not the counterfeit. The Imams, peace and blessings be upon them all, have asked us to come to them. The counterfeit is when the ziyarah stops being for the Imam and becomes for the feed. When the visit becomes the post. When the post becomes the self. When the self travels nowhere but to the next post. And it is the same disease, the same architecture that lets the wealthy man perform Hajj every year as a badge of his standing, while the poor man at the end of his own street has never even seen Mecca. That lets him send a family on Umrah and then remind them year after year after year of that kindness done to them, when the truth of it is actually the entire inverse. The wealth was God's gift, given through the opportunity of the other. The believer of substance kisses the feet of the one through whom God gave him the chance. The believer of form puts the receipt upon the wall. Theology reduced to a mood. Imam Hussein reduced to a hashtag. The form remains, the substance leaks out into the algorithms. The second form this counterfeit takes deserves naming very carefully. Years ago, in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, I sat through a Muharram majlis and heard a zakir, a speaker, deliver a narration I have never been able to find in any classical chronicle, or anywhere for that matter. That on the day of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein had asked Yazid's army that he be permitted to go to India because the people there had a good religion. The intent was kind. The substance is an entire misrepresentation, a tahrif. The historical record, authenticated across the chronicles, from Shaykh al-Mufid's Kitab al-Irshad to al-Kufi's al-Tabari, al-Lahuf of Sayyid ibn Tawus, of Ray Shahri's chronicles, and many, many others. Imam Hussein offered Umar ibn Sa'ad's army three alternatives. Let me return. Let me go to a frontier of the Muslim lands, a distant land, or let me go to Yazid himself. India is not in the classical Arabic. The phrase is a distant land, left unspecified. A question may have surfaced. Why did the Master of Witnesses offer these alternatives at all? Has he not come this far precisely to refuse the regime? And the answer is Itmam Hujjat, the completion of the proof. The Master of Witnesses did not come to Karbala to die. He came to be the proof of God on earth in his age. And the proof requires that the regime be given the choice. The proof is not the witnessing of the crime. The proof is the removal of every excuse. This is the methodology God names in a verse that we recite every morning if we recite Dua al-Ahad. This is from Qur'an, Surah al-Rum, the chapter of the Romans, 30th chapter of the Qur'an, verse 41, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, corruption has appeared in the land and the sea by what the hands of men have wrought, that he may make them taste a part of that which they have done, so that they may return. By what the hands of men have wrought, so that they may return. Every consequence, every trial, every overturning is itself an invitation back. And in Dua al-Ahad, the supplication of the covenant that we will discuss during the Arba'in series, which is attributed to Imam al-Sadiq, recited every morning by the believer, pledged to the Imam of our age, this very verse is invoked alongside the petition for the dhuhur, for the return of the hidden Imam. Where the hands of men have wrought destruction, God restores through the appointed proof. So when Imam al-Hussein offered Yazid's army return, frontier, or Yazid himself, he was extending this option of so that they may return to a regime whose refusal was their own conviction. And they refused. They sealed their refusal with the throat of his infant son. As I said, we will return to Dua al-Ahad itself in session 15, which will be at Arba'in, when this whole series, God willing, closes. Tonight, we're just merely planting the seed. The Lucknow scholar Sayyid Ali Naqi Naqawi, known as Naqan Sahib, corrected the geographic specification a century ago. Imam Hussein, he quotes in the references in the write-up, he said, Imam Hussein asked Hur to let him go to some distant land. The Imam did not mention Hind or India, but some people in India took that as a reference to Hindustan, which is the more formal name of India. The second step, that Imam Hussein endorsed Hindu religion. This point first appears in the 19th century in Punjabi in something called Jangnama, composed around 1850-ish. It is a folk epic, not a chronicle, and the Master of Witnesses is the proof of God on earth in his age. To put in his mouth, the people of India have a good religion, is to do to him what the kamikaze script did to the Japanese boy in the cockpit. To use his voice to say something that he did not say. Now let me distinguish with love. There is a real community that I honor separately by name, the Hussaini Brahmins. These are Mohyal Brahmins of the Punjab, a real Hindu community whose oral tradition preserves the memory of someone called Rishabh Dutt, having led a small band of Indian career soldiers and fought against Imam al-Hussein at Karbala. Now, the 12 Maqtal canon doesn't really strongly attest this narration, but the community is a community, and the love across 13 centuries is real, and the Muharram observance that they have every year is certainly real. And we honor the Hussaini Brahmins for this. The first is a community that came to Imam Hussein and that remain. And the second put words in Imam Hussein's mouth that are not his. The first we honor, and the second we lift gently, with the gentleness that we lifted the wedding henna of Qasem and the perfume shop of Habib ibn Madahir. And a particular form this counterfeit takes deserves naming further because it appears increasingly in our own pulpits. The borrowed iconography move, the use of one tradition's iconography of suffering to dignify another's claim without theological accountability. When a community whose own tradition has produced the witness, Karbala, the 72, Ali al-Asghar in his father's arms, Sayyid Zainab in the courts of the tyrant, borrows the iconography of another tradition's suffering on the grounds that borrowing will give us political standing in a contemporary conversation, we have decorated the witness with someone else's clothing. An example. I will not name the speaker. We critique the move, we don't attack the person. We never attack the person. There is no purpose in this. Some years ago, a sermon was delivered in our community in the UK that attempted to draw an equivalence between Karbala and the Holocaust, the Nazi execution of European Jewry, amongst others. Now, the intention may well have been solidarity. The result was a Tabyeen failure on three fronts, which I will enumerate. Failure number one. First, Quranic cherry picking. The sermon cited only one part of Surah Al-Imran, the chapter of the family of Imran, third chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 64, which says, O people of the book, come to a common word, and stopped before the verse continues, and the verse continues saying, O people of the book, come to a common word, that we worship none but God, and we associate no partners with him. The common word is the worship of the one God. Cherry picking the verse to make it mean like we are all the same, this is tahrif, this is misinterpretation, this is abuse. The same sermon cited Surah al-Asr, the chapter of time, 103rd chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 2. Mankind is in a state of loss, but without, verse number 3, except those who believe and do righteous deeds and counsel each other to truth and counsel each other to patience. A cherry-picked Qur'an is a tahrif. Failure number 2. Inflated and conflated numbers. The sermon framed the Holocaust as a Jewish-only catastrophe of 6 million. The documented record from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum is 17,383,900 souls who were killed in the camps and the killing fields of the Nazi terror machine. Yes, about 6 million were Jewish. About 11.4 million were not. They were Roma and Sinti, Polish civilians, Soviet prisoners of war, the disabled, religious dissenters, political prisoners, homosexuals, men and women, and many, many others. To frame the Holocaust as a single people catastrophe is to obscure the dead the framing did not need. Failure number 3. Third, and this is the line that closes the counterfeit, the categorical difference theological argument. The dead of the Holocaust did not choose. They were rounded up, boarded onto trains, stripped, gassed and burnt. Not one of them stood at a doorway like Hur ibn Yazid on the morning of Ashura and said, "I will not bow." They were victims of an industrial atrocity that did not give them a choice. Yes, we honor them, we mourn them, we name the system that killed them, and we name those that are still doing a Holocaust in Gaza today. But we do not equate them with the master of witnesses who had a choice, who refused consciously the pledge of allegiance to Yazid, even when refusing meant his death and the death of his family and companions. The Holocaust was an atrocity. Karbala was a witness. To equate them is to flatten both. And here is the line that forecloses the borrowing. When Sayyid Zainab stood in the court of Ibn Ziyad, may the mercy of God be distant from him, in the days after Ashura, and was asked how she had seen what was done to her family, she said, "Ma ra'aytu illa jamila." I saw nothing except beauty. The references are all in the write-up. What she saw was the loyalty of the 72 to God, to the truth God revealed, and to her brother as the proof of that truth upon the earth. Not the loyalty of a flag, not the loyalty of an ethnos, not the loyalty of a state or the state's enemy. She saw God loyalty, and this is what closes and ends this fake equivalence. Karbala is not interchangeable with any other suffering, irrespective of how vast, how terrible it may be. Because Karbala's substance is not the suffering. Karbala's substance is the witness. Let us apply the test to this. Test 1, disqualified. There is no God anchor. The loyalty is to a contemporary political claim. Test 2 fails. Cherry-picked revelation, inflated numbers, conflated categories. And test 3 fails. The borrowing is not consciousness, it is the inheritance of someone else's framing. This is entirely counterfeit. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the fourth counterfeit, which is the two empires of our hour.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
And the fourth counterfeit is the one this series has been building toward. The most expensively dressed counterfeit. The one that clothes itself in the most respectable garments of all, the moral language of the modern empire. Last night I planted the seed when we spoke of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Tonight we open the seed. The state-manufactured righteous nation claim, the form of empire that justifies its wars by wrapping them in the vocabulary of dignity or freedom or civilization or democracy or the chosen people or the city upon the hill. The structure is the same as Yazid's claim. I am the legitimate heir of the Prophet's family while I slaughter the Prophet's family. Imam Hussein refused that form at Karbala, and we refuse it tonight. Two registers. Honor without conflation applies between them too. We name both. We do not collapse them. Firstly, the American Imperial Register. The rhetoric. A city on a hill, leader of the free world, the indispensable nation, the arsenal of democracy. These phrases have been deployed for nigh on 2 centuries to dignify what would have otherwise been naked imperial action. And the record? More than 469 documented military interventions abroad, verified by the Costs of War Project at Brown University and the Congressional Research Service. References are in the write-up. The bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, August 1945. The covert overthrows, Mossadegh 1953, Arbenz 1954, Lumumba 1961, Allende 1973. The list is endless. The Iran-Iraq dual arms supply of the 1980s. We sold weapons to both sides of an 8-year war that killed 1 million people. The sanctions, Iraq under food for oil, where 500,000 children died by the UN's own estimate. And the Secretary of State of the time asked about it on national television and said, the price was worth it. The 12 and more Gaza ceasefire vetoes just since October 2023. And the tone lock. We honor the American mother who lost her son to Iraq. We honor the American teacher whose schools are starved while bombs are sent to Tel Aviv. We honor the American worker whose taxes have built 900 overseas military bases while their own roads and infrastructure crumbles. The witness against the American regime is the witness for the American people that the regime betrays. This is not anti-American sentiment. It is the same sentiment America's own honest dissenters have voiced for more than a century. From Major General Smedley Butler's War is a Racket in 1935 to Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X, saying if violence is wrong in America, violence is wrong abroad, who was assassinated for the truth of it on the 21st of February 1965. To Dr. Martin Luther King's the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today is my own government in 1967. And to Aaron Bushnell's last words at the Israeli embassy on the 25th of February 2024, free Palestine. None of these were anti-American. In fact, they were the most American voices their century had to offer. And now we look at the Zionist Imperial Register. And the rhetoric? The only democracy in the Middle East. A light unto the nations. And the move we name explicitly, the invocation of the biblical Amalek narrative as theological cover for state violence against civilian populations. And the founding logic, written into the diaries and essays before the entity existed. Theodor Herzl in his diary on the 12th of June 1895, 2 years before the first Zionist Congress, and 53 years before the UN partition vote. He writes, the references are all in the write-up. Theodor Herzl writes, we shall try to spirit the penniless population across the border by procuring employment for it in the transit countries, while denying it any employment in our own country. Both the process of expropriation and the removal of the poor must be carried out discreetly and circumspectly. The transfer logic of the Nakba is in the diary of the founder 53 years before the trains and the trucks and the burnt villages of 1948. Then you have Ze'ev Jabotinsky, founder of revisionist Zionism, the ideological father of the Likud party, Netanyahu's party. In The Iron Wall, 4th of November 1923, references again are in the write-up, he writes, Zionist colonization must either be terminated or carried out in defiance of the will of the native population, only under the protection of a force independent of the local population, an iron wall which the native population cannot break through. Then you have David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of the entity, in his diary in June 1937, 11 years before he gave the order. He writes, the references again are all in the write-up, we must expel the Arabs and take their places. The transfer is in the diary of the founder. The wall of force is in the essay of his ideological successor. The expulsion is in the diary of the man who gave the order 11 years later. And then the dehumanization language entered the mouths of the politicians and it stayed there. Menachem Begin, 1982, in the Knesset, he gave a speech during the Lebanon War. Palestinians as two-legged beasts. References are in the write-up. Raphael Eitan, in 1983, the then chief of staff of the Israeli, they call themselves Defense Forces, the Israeli terrorist forces, we should call them. Palestinians as crocodiles. Then you have Ehud Barak in 2000, former prime minister. We were speaking of the resistance, and he said, a war against beasts. And then you have Moshe Ya'alon in 2002, who was then the chief of staff. Palestinian nationalism as, quote, a cancerous manifestation. Then you have Ayelet Shaked in 2014, then a Knesset member. She posted on Facebook during the Gaza assault, a war against the Amalekites. And then you have Yoav Gallant on the 9th of October 2023, then defense minister, human animals. And then you have Benjamin Netanyahu on the 28th of October 2023 in his speech announcing the ground invasion of Gaza. Remember what Amalek did to you. The explicit invocation of the biblical genocidal command of 1 Samuel chapter 15 verse 3. The pattern is more than 80 years long, older than the Zionist entity's own UN recognition, reaching back to Jabotinsky's Iron Wall and to Herzl himself. The pattern is in their own mouths. And then the operations followed. Sabra and Shatila in 1982. Operation Cast Lead 2008-2009. Operation Protective Edge 2014. Swords of Iron from 2023, October 2023, in which by the most conservative document count, more than 70,000 have returned to their Lord in Gaza, at least half of them women and children. And the genocide continues. And the tone lock again. The witness against the Zionist regime is not anti-Jewish. It is anti the rhetoric that prepares the massacre. We honor the Jewish family that opposes the Zionist regime, and there are many. The Jewish dissenters from Hannah Arendt to Norman Finkelstein to Naomi Klein to the rabbis of the New Tractate. The thousands of Jewish students arrested at Columbia and UCLA and universities in the UK in 2024 for refusing this rhetoric in their own community at great personal cost. The witness against the regime is the witness for these people. And here we must bring in our series-wide voice. Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, the Secretary General of the Islamic Resistance, martyred with his wife Sayyid Siham and their 5-year-old son Sayyid Hussein by an Israeli helicopter strike on the 16th of February 1992. From the pulpit in the Beqa Valley in February of 1986, in his well-known speech titled The Mandate of Awareness, the references for which are in the write-up, of course, he said, this is very important, the enemies may root themselves against us, but we are on the path of our Imam Khomeini. We believe in the principle established by this Imam. Kill us, for indeed our nation will become more and more aware. The mandate of the believer in our time is to know and to name. The mandate against the Imperial Counterfeit is not hatred of any people. It is the disavowal, the bara'ah, of every system that calls itself righteous while it kills the children of God. The fuller treatment of how the resistance slogans function as bara'ah and not as bughd or hatred, they function as disassociation and not hatred, belongs to the Arba'een body of this series, and we will cover it in great detail over there. Tonight we just name the structural critique. And let us now apply the test once more. Test number 1 is inverted. The loyalty is to the throne and the chosen people claim. It is not to God. Test 2 fails. The oppression of peoples is forbidden. The Qur'an in Surah al-Hajj, the chapter of the pilgrimage, 22nd chapter of the Qur'an, verses 39 to 40, explicitly grants the wrong the right to resist. And if we must say it, The United Nations Charter allows occupied people and people under oppression to take up arms and make resistance. In the Qur'an, which for us is the benchmark, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Hajj, the chapter of pilgrimage, like I said, 22nd chapter of the Qur'an, verses 39 to 40. Those who are fought against are permitted to fight because they have been wronged, and God is indeed able to help them. Those who were expelled from their homes unjustly, only because they said, God is our Lord. Had not God repulsed the people from one another, ruin would have befallen the monasteries, the churches, the synagogues, and the mosques, in which God's name is much invoked. God will surely help those who help him. Indeed, God is all strong and almighty. Test 3 also fails. The script is the empire's. The consciousness is what the empire cannot allow. It is counterfeit on every door. And the figure killed by this very counterfeit, not by ISIS, not by Daesh, not by the Takfiri who beheaded Martyr Hojaji, but by the Imperial Counterfeit at the next layer up of the same system, was killed 3 days into the new year on the airport road in Baghdad by the direct order of an American president, by a missile fired from an MQ Reaper drone operated out of the Creech Air Force Base in Nevada, USA. We turn to him now, and we close the 4-stage road. We have been walking with him since the 3rd night. Please give me a salawat, and we move on to a stage on the road, Shahadat.
اللهم صل على محمد محمد وعجل.
3 stages have led us here. Talab in night 3, the quest. Ishq in night 5, love. Ma'rifat in night 7, knowledge, gnosis. Tonight, the 4th stage, the one that empties the spiritual life out into the body's witness, Shahadat. And the figure who walks us through this stage, Hajj Qasem Soleimani, may God rest his pure soul. He does not walk us through it as a teacher. He walks us through it as one who passed through it himself. 6 years ago on the airport road in Baghdad. And the love that prepared him for it, the grief that sealed him, was the love Sayyid Zainab named the night before. First the love of God, then the love of the truth he revealed, and then the love of the Imam he appointed, the proof of God, the Hujjat of God, the awaited master. May our souls be his ransom. May God hasten his return. And through that triple loyalty, the love of a young Iranian named in honor, as I said, of the first martyr of Ahlul Bayt after the passing of Prophet, Mohsen ibn Ali, peace and blessings be upon him. Now listen carefully to the names in this family. His mother, Zahra Mukhtarpur, named him Mohsen, the doer of beauty, in honor of Mohsen ibn Ali, the unborn son of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra and the commander of the faithful Imam Ali. In the 11th year of the Hijrah, in the days that followed the passing of the Prophet, there was a moment at the threshold of a house in Medina that the Husseiniya tradition has carried in its grief for 14 years, 14 centuries. The house of the Prophet's daughter, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, the house where the commander of the faithful lived. And at the threshold of that house, something happened that should never have happened. Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra was carrying a child, a son, whom the Prophet himself had named Mohsen. In the violence at the threshold, the unborn child did not survive. The first martyr of the Ahlul Bayt, after the passing of the Prophet himself, Mohsen ibn Ali, fell at the threshold of his mother's house, in the womb of his mother. The architecture of Karbala did not begin at Karbala. It began at the threshold, and the references to all of this are in the write-up. Now let me pause here and speak from the heart, with the firmness on truth and the tenderness with the people the dyad of al-Fath demands. We carry this sorrow as a community. We do not carry it as a weapon. The Grand Maraja of our age, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Sistani, may God preserve him, has taught us, when speaking of our Sunni brethren and sisters, do not say our Sunni brothers, rather say our very selves, anfusana. And they are not other to us, they are us, the body of the Muslim community. And the Qur'an itself teaches us in Surah al-An'am, the chapter of the cattle, 6th chapter of the Qur'an, verse 164, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no soul bearing burden bears the burden of another. The grandchildren of those who were at the threshold are not the ones who stood at the threshold. The commander of the faithful, having walked through the sorrow of the threshold, cooperated with the three caliphs who came before him. He gave his counsel. He defended the third caliph against the rioters. He sent his sons, Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussein, as well as al-Abbas and others from the youth of the family of Hashim, to stand at the door of Uthman's house in his defense. The commander of the faithful did not let his personal grief become a permanent civil war. That is the model. And open the books of our Sunni brothers themselves, the books that they hold the most authoritative. And the recognition of the commander of the faithful is right there in the highest Sunni canon. In Sahih al-Bukhari, hadith number 4481, the second Khalif, Umar ibn al-Khattab, himself says, our best reciter of the Qur'an is Ubay, and our best judge is Ali. This is Umar's own words. In the Sunni canon's highest authority, with no dispute over its chain. The second Khalif, in his own voice, naming the commander of the faithful as the best judge of the entire community. And the Prophet himself, in another Sahih hadith, in the highest Sunni canon, at Khaybar, Sahih Bukhari, hadith 2975, and correspondingly in Sahih Muslim, hadith 2406. Again, all the references are there. It's not my manner to talk references, but over here they're important. Named the commander of the faithful as the man whom God loves and who loves God in return, the man to whom the flag is given. The hadith reads, Prophet is saying, tomorrow I will surely give the flag to a man who loves God and his messenger, and God and his messenger love him in return. And the flag was given to Imam Ali, the commander of the faithful. The man whom God loves and who loves God in return. That is in the Sunni canon's own attestation. And in Sahih Muslim, hadith 2404a, and in Sahih Bukhari, hadith 3708, at the expedition of Tabuk, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, said to Imam Ali, you are to me in the position of Aaron to Moses, except that there is no prophet after me. The deputy of the Prophet, the brother of his mission, Aaron to Moses. That is the place of the commander of the faithful in the Sunni canon's own attestation. We do not borrow it. The Sunni canon gives it. We name Mohsen ibn Ali not in order to make grievance against our beloved Sunni brethren, who are our very selves. We name him because it is the truth of what happened, and the truth of what happened is the seed of Karbala. The architecture rhymes across 14 centuries, and the rhyme is in the names and the thresholds, not in the violence. The hands at the threshold in Medina in year 11 were not the hands that struck in Tanf in the year 1438 or 2015 or 2017, sorry. The Takfiri ideology of Daesh descends from the Khawarij of Nahrawan, the very sect that arose against the commander of the faithful and would, years later, after the Medina threshold, strike him down in the prayer niche or mihrab of Kufa. Different historical sorrows, different ideological currents, the same architectural shape. The mother of the young Iranian we are speaking of named him for the first martyr. And he died as the first martyr died, at the threshold, at the hands of those who would not bear the witness that he bore. Hold on to that. Mohsen Hojaji was born on the 12th of July 1991 in Najafabad, which is in Isfahan province of Iran. His father was Muhammad Reza Hojaji. He was a veteran of the Sacred Defense, the 8-year war, Iran-Iraq War as they call it. From his teenage years, he was active at the Shaheed Ahmed Qasem Cultural Center. Volunteer work, teaching literacy in underserved villages, organizing book reading programs, the kind of young man who would visit his parents and kiss their hands every day when he came home. He met Zahra Abbasi at the Shaheed Qasem Center during Sacred Defense Week in 2012. He was 21 and she was 18. They were both volunteering as cultural activists. They married. And listen to the dowry that he gave her, that she asked for. 124,000 salawat, sending blessings on the Prophet Muhammad and his family. The memorization of the Qur'an with its meaning and understanding, and a single gold coin. That is the dowry of the man that we're speaking about. That is the ishq of session 5 made literal in the life of a young couple from Najafabad. She married a young man at a Sacred Defense cultural exhibition who would 6 years later be a figure she would speak of with the words, "Look at my husband's eyes." In April 2016, they had a son. They named him Ali, for Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, the commander of the faithful, the father of Imam al-Hussein. The naming chain reaches both backwards and forwards. 3 generations, the name of the Prophet, the 8th Imam, the commander of the faithful, and the first martyr of Ahlul Bayt after the passing of Prophet, woven into one Iranian family from Najafabad. One chain of witness reaching backwards to the threshold of Sayyidah Fatima's house and forward to the present hour. Now in Ramadan of 1438, around June 2017, Mohsen took his mother on pilgrimage to the shrine of Imam al-Rida in Mashhad. They went together for the holy nights of the month of Ramadan, and specifically the night of Qadr. On the 21st night of Ramadan, the night the commander of the faithful, having been struck 2 nights earlier in the mihrab of Kufa during Fajr prayer, while he was in prostration, as we've mentioned, returned to his Lord. On that night, in the shrine of his 8th descendant, Mohsen sent his mother a message asking her to pray that he be permitted to return to Syria and to be honored in the presence of Sayyid Zainab. Listen to that. The night the commander of the faithful received his Shahada became the night that Mohsen Hojaji asked for his. The receiving and the asking on the same night, almost 14 centuries apart. His mother gave her blessing. And this is what is called in the language of our tradition, aqibat bi-khayri, the good end. The young man asked God for the good end on the night of the commander of the faithful received it. He deployed for his second tour of Syria on the 17th of July, 2017. And on the 7th of August, the 16th of Mordad of the Iranian calendar, his unit was ambushed by Daesh or ISIS at the Tanf border crossing. He was wounded and captured alive. We've already named what the world's eye saw in that face. 2 days later, on the 9th of August, he was beheaded by his captors. As I said, he was only 26 years old. His son Ali was 1 year and 4 months old, asleep in Najafabad. And on the 10th of August, the very day after the news of the beheading was confirmed, Hajj Qasem issued a public vow. References in the write-up. Hajj Qasem said, "I swear by the severed throat of this dear martyr Mohsen Hojaji, who walked the path of Abu Abdullah, peace and blessings be upon him," Abu Abdullah of course being Imam Hussein, "that we will not rest until we have pursued this cursed progeny and eradicated this dangerous tumor that has emerged in the body of the Islamic world down to the very last one of them." He swears not on the Qur'an, not on the shrine, not on his own honor. He swears on the severed throat. The throat that was slit becomes the witness against the system that slit it. And then, in a separate personal note that was not really for public broadcast, Hajj Qasem, writing as a man, not as a commander, he said something that closes the question this whole night turns upon. This is the line of this night. Hajj Qasem said, the reference is in the write-up. Hajj Qasem said, "Greetings to Hojaji, who became a hujjat, a proof on how to live and how to die. I sacrificed myself for that throat, which was slit like the throat of Imam al-Hussein, and greetings to that head, which like the head of the Master of Martyrs, its burial place is unknown and was taken to the heavens." The recognition. Listen to what Hajj Qasem has just done. The mother named her son for Mohsen ibn Ali, the first martyr of Ahlul Bayt, as I said, who fell at the threshold of his mother's house. The boy was also born into a family named Hojaji, the surname that carries the Hujjah, the HJJ root, the very root of the word Hujjat, proof. The commander, looking at the calm face in the photo, said, Hujjati shud, meaning he became a Hujjah. The mother's hope, the surname's promise, the commander's recognition, three threads converging in one word. Hajj Qasem was not using a metaphor. The young man named for the first martyr at the threshold, born into the family that carries the name, carries the root for proof, died at a threshold by hands that, like the hands at the first threshold, and like the hands that struck the commander of the faithful in the prayer niche in the year 40, refused the witness the young bore. He had become a hujjah, a proof. And then he made a parallel literal. The throat slit like the throat of Imam al-Hussein. The head taken to the heavens like the head of the master of the martyrs. The body that returned to Iran was incomplete. Only a leg, parts of the torso, identified by DNA matching, and his boots. The head was never recovered to this day. ISIS or Daesh had taken it. What in Hajj Qasem's note is poetic, taken to the heavens, is also literal. And one more detail his sister Fatima shared in an interview. The gem of his ring read Ya Zahra. The defender of the holy shrine of Sayyid Zainab carried on his finger the name of her mother, Sayyid Fatima al-Zahra, the mother of all the Imams. And the martyred leader of the Muslim Ummah, Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, sealed it. He attended Hojaji's funeral in Tehran on the 27th of September 2017, prayed beside the casket and met privately with the family. To the family on the 3rd of October 2017, he said the following, the references are in the write-up. God cherished your martyr. There was a special quality in this young man. God's work is never without wisdom. This young man's sincerity, his pure intention, his timely action, and the society's need for such a martyrdom, this caused God Almighty to elevate the name of your young man, your martyr, and to make him highly esteemed. And on the photograph itself, the very photograph that the world had seen, it's in the write-up, you can see it, I'm sure maybe you've all seen it. The leader wrote with his own hand. He wrote the following, again the references in the write-up. In the name of God the Most High, the peace and blessings of God be upon this proud and eminent martyr who, at the most sensitive and critical moment of his life, became a symbol of victorious and manifest truth against decaying falsehood. And in public, the leader gave him the title that Hajj Qasem had given him and made it the verdict of the entire community. Imam Khamenei said, Martyr Hojaji became God's proof before everyone's eyes. Hujjat Khuda, the proof of God. The same word, the same name the hidden Imam carries. The same word the 72 carried last night. The same word the mother had given the son. And on the 21st of September 2017, at Hojaji's Arba'een commemoration, 40th day after his funeral commemoration, exactly 40 days actually after his beheading, Hajj Qasem made a second public vow of that year. The vow we already used in session 5 of this gathering. When we did not yet know, I had not revealed whose Arba'een it was. Hajj Qasem said, the reference is again in the write-up, less than 3 months from now, the end of Daesh and the Daesh government on this earth will be announced. 3 months later, in November of 2017, the vow was kept. The Section 5 anchor we used in this gathering was a Hojaji moment all along. Tonight we name it. And the Takfiri counterfeit, the enemy Hojaji had died facing as a defender of the holy shrines, Hajj Qasem broke within months. But the network that had killed Hojaji was the next layer up. 3 years and 3 months after Hojaji's beheading on the 3rd of January 2020, by direct order of an American president, by an American MQ-9 Reaper, a drone on the access road as the convoy left Baghdad International Airport, the Imperial Counterfeit at the next layer up killed Hajj Qasem himself alongside Hajj Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. May God rest both their souls. Listen to the architecture. The master of martyrs killed by Yazid's army. Hojaji killed by ISIS or Daesh, the Takfiri form of the same architecture in our age. Hajj Qasem killed by the imperial regime that armed and funded both, and that, when the takfiri form had been broken, killed the man who had broken it. Hajj Qasem's own last words in the handwritten note found in his pocket at the scene 2 hours before his Shahada. He wrote the following, and this is inside the book, Our Fortunate Friend, that has been our companion through this series. Hajj Qasem writes, and the reference, like I said, is in the write-up. O Lord, do not abandon me to myself. O Lord, I love the meeting with you, the meeting that left Moses, peace and blessings be upon him, unable to stand or breathe. O Lord, accept me purified. And here 2 voices from the Hojaji household, voices that speak forward. Fatima Hojaji, his sister, has spoken in multiple interviews of her brother's death, not as a loss, but as a chosen love. And the aqibat bi khairi, the good end he had been preparing for in his way since childhood. As his arrival at the place he had been walking towards. That is Shaheed Mutahri's 3rd condition of conscious witness. Awareness, wakefulness, consciousness in a sister's voice. And Ali Hojaji, his son. Ali was 1 year and 4 months old when his father went. He knows his father only through photographs and letters and the community's memories. There is a question that lives in the elegiac tradition of every Shaheed family in our age. The question that lives in the poetry of the families of the defenders of the holy shrines. The question that lives in the children of the sacred defense of Karbala in our own hour, of Gaza, of Lebanon, of every place of Yemen, of every place where a young father went forward and did not return. And the question is, Baba, why did you go? We do not put this question by attribution in the mouth of Ali Hojaji specifically. We honor the tradition the question lives in. We know it is somewhere in his heart as he grows up looking at his father's photograph. We know it is in the heart of every child, of every martyr, every witness, every shaheed across all of our communities. And we know it is the same question God asked Cain at the field, and the same question we've been asking for 9 nights, and the same question we will ask the Master of Witnesses tomorrow night at noon on the 10th. Where is your brother? The chain holds. The witness, after the witness, after the witness, holds. Hojaji passed every test we are about to learn. So did Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, so did Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, so did Hajj Qasem, so did Hajj Imad and Hajj Abu Mahdi, and so did the 72 of last night. So did Al-Abbas, Al-Qasim, Ali Al-Akbar, Aoun, Muhammad, Hur, Wahab, etc., etc. Peace and blessings be upon them all. The test is the test by which we know who is walking the road and who is merely wearing fancy dress or wearing the costume. We turn to it now. Please give me a salawat and we do the 3 tests.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
We have walked the 4 counterfeits and applied the tests beat by beat. Now we name them clean, the 3 doors through which every claim must pass. The first test. First, is the witness in the service of the covenant with God? Not with a flag, not with an empire, not with a state, not with any aesthetic, not with a party, not with an ethnos, a market, a peer group, a righteous nation, a sect, a pure sect even, or a self-image. La ilaha illallah. There is no God but God. Any death whose content is loyalty to anything below God is counterfeit by definition. The second test. Is the act consistent with the law God has revealed? Not just any cause, not just any grievance, not just any sincerity. The death must be in service of the ideology of the deen and the amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar, the enjoining the good and the forbidding of the evil, within the boundary that the law sets. The Qur'an in Surah al-Ma'idah, the chapter of the table spread, 5th chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 32, names the killing of non-combatants as the killing of all mankind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes, "This is why we decreed for the children of Israel that whoever kills a soul without its being guilty of manslaughter or corruption on the earth is as though he had killed all of mankind. And whoever saves a life is though he has saved all of mankind. Our apostles certainly brought them manifest signs, yet even after that, many of them commit excesses upon the earth." And in Surah Hajj, 22nd chapter of the Quran, chapter of the pilgrimage, verses 39 to 40, the verse is revealed precisely to permit the resistance of the oppressed against the oppressor. We quoted them earlier, but it's Qur'an, so it's always nice to quote it again. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Those who are fought against are permitted to fight because they have been wronged, and God is indeed able to help them. Those who were expelled from their homes unjustly only because they said, 'God is our Lord.' Had not God repulsed the people from one another, ruin would have befallen the monasteries, the churches, the synagogues, and the mosques, in which God's name is much invoked. God will surely help those who help him. Indeed, God is all strong and almighty." The empire that oppresses cannot also claim to be the righteous nation. The takfiri who kills the non-combatant cannot also claim to be the soldier of God. And the third test. Third, Shaheed Mutahhari's third condition of conscious witness: awareness, wakefulness, and consciousness. The witness must know, full, soberly, without the script clicks of the system that wrote his interiority. He must know what he is dying for and why. The kamikaze pilot was sincere. However, he was not conscious. The state had written his script and he was merely reading it. Shaheed Hojaji was entirely conscious. He signed his martyrdom permit by his own hands on the 21st night of the month of Ramadan, in his mother's presence at the shrine of Imam al-Rida. Witness. 3 tests, 3 doors, 1 criterion underneath. And the criterion, the one always under all 3, is the Imam of the age, the proof of God upon the earth, the criterion against whom every claim is weighed. In our age, the hidden Imam, may our souls be his ransom, may God hasten his return. And in the chain of those who prepared for his return, from Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul, to Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, to Imam Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei, may God protect him, the current and present Wali al-Faqih. To die for any other authority, irrespective of how beautiful it might be, or how sincere it might be, or how popular it might be, is to quote the samurai code, the way of the beasts, a dog's death. The Hagakure name for it that we mentioned last night. The Yosano name for it, the way of beasts. The corrective of this night. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the pact that we make tonight.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
So 3 propositions to take home. First, we will know the counterfeits, political, ritual, cultural, imperial, so well that we cannot be fooled. The eye that has seen Hojaji's face cannot mistake the takfiri's claim. The eye that has seen the 72 cannot mistake the cherry blossom of the empire. The eye that has seen Sayyid Zainab's vision cannot mistake the borrowed cross. Second, we will speak with firmness on truth and gentleness with the people. Tabyeen, not singling out. Clarification, not singling out. We honor the love. We adjust the form. We walk together. And third, we will apply the 3 tests to every claim of martyrdom before we bless it. loyalty to God, consistency with God's law, and full consciousness of why. Before we ever say the word Shaheed again about anyone in any context, we apply the 3 tests. If we cannot answer all 3, we hold our tongue. We do not bless the word until we know it. And we will get to know it more in the Arba'een sessions. I promise you, there is material coming that will make very clear this subject of witness in the judicial manner and in the theological manner. Shaheed Mutahari named the disease of the pulpit at the start of our series 8 nights ago. Tonight we name the medicine. Know the real thing so well that you cannot be fooled by the counterfeit. And the road ahead? Tomorrow night, the criterion himself. The one against whom every counterfeit is weighed. The one whose face the Takfiri's photograph could not approach. The one whose loyalty the empire could not manufacture. The one whose consciousness the system could not script. Imam Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, peace and blessings be upon him. Tomorrow we stand at his grave. Tonight we mourn the one his body folded around at the very last, the suckling infant in his father's arms. And the question we leave you with, the question that has been ours for 9 nights, and is ours tonight in a child's voice: where is your brother? The child of every martyr asks his father at 3 years old, at 4 years old, at the age he is now. The question every child of every martyr has asked since Cain stood on the empty field. We ask the hidden Imam, may our souls be his ransom, may God hasten his return. Every morning we awake. The hidden Imam will ask of each of us on the day we are asked to give our account. Are we still walking, brother, or are we merely wearing the costume? And tonight, I bring you to the witness that no counterfeiter can ever steal. The witness so small that the chronicles barely preserved his name. The witness whose only word was a cry. The witness whose only hand was the hand of the father who carried him out towards the river. To him and to his mother who stood when the tents had burnt and the captives were released and the road back had been walked, and who would not move from the grave for a year. To Ali al-Asghar, also called Abdullah ibn al-Hussein al-Radi, the suckling, son of Imam al-Hussein and Sayyidah Rabab, his mother, the wife of Imam al-Hussein, the mother who became the witness after the witness. Let us listen. Please give me a loud salawat as we would now segue across to the maqtal.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على
على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم والعن أعداءهم.
So now we have a short supplication and then we conclude. So, peace upon Abel, the first witness of the earth. Peace upon every witness and every tradition who refused to bow to other than God. Peace upon every man and every woman who has been wronged, expelled from their home only because they said, our Lord is God. O God, we have nowhere to go but your door. O God, we come to you tonight on the verse you revealed in the cave. Shall we inform you about the biggest losers in regard to their works? Those whose endeavour goes awry in the life of this world while they suppose that they're doing good. Make us not of those whose works have gone astray while they thought they were doing good. Open our eyes to the counterfeit. Open our hearts to the witness. Open our hands to the work that the witness was for. Give us the 3 locks the night taught, loyalty above whom, consistency with which law, and chosen by what consciousness. Make these locks the doors of our heart. Make us refuse in our generation what Imam al-Hussein refused in his. Peace upon the prophets, O God. Adam, Abel, Noah, Abraham, Ishmael, Ishaq, Moses, Aaron, David and Solomon, John the Baptist and Zechariah, Jesus the son of Mary, and our beloved Prophet Muhammad, and peace upon every prophet whose name we know and those whose names only you know. And peace upon Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, the man who taught us in the Biqa in 1986 that the duty of the believer is to know and to name. And we are on the path of Imam al-Khomeini, that the principle that closes every counterfeit is, kill us, for indeed our nation will become more and more aware. Peace be upon his wife, said Siham, and peace be upon their son, said Hussein, the 5-year-old, taken with them on that road in February of 1992. And peace be upon his teacher in the line, Sheikh Raghib Harab, the Sheikh of the Resistance Martyrs, who taught us silence is the position of the cowards. And peace be upon Hajj Qasem, the man whose 4-stage road we have closed tonight. Talab or quest, ishq or love, ma'rifat recognition, and Shahada witness. The boy from Kerman whose father worked with water and with the field and with agriculture. The lover whose breath was bound to Imam al-Hussein's. The discerner who knew what is worth dying for and what is not. The witness finally on the airport road in Baghdad on the 3rd of January 2020. We honor him with the word he gave to the young man whose arba'een triggered the vow. We honor him with the word the leader of his community gave him, Hujjat Khuda, proof of God. O Lord, accept his last prayer, the prayer he wrote 2 hours before his martyrdom, where he said, O Lord, do not abandon me to myself. O Lord, I love the meeting with you, the meeting that left Moses, peace and blessings be upon him, unable to stand or breathe. O Lord, accept me purified, and give us the honor of following in his pathway. Peace be upon Hajj Imad Mughniye, the architect of the Islamic resistance, who fell in Damascus in 2008. Peace be upon Hajj Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, who met Hajj Qasem at the terminal and walked into the convoy beside him. And peace be upon Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, taken from us on the 27th of September 2024, the resistance leader whose voice carried the Husseini cause for decades and decades and continues to do so. And peace be upon Imam Khomeini, the Imam of the revolution, the principal giver of the resistance. And peace be upon Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the leader who stood with the resistance for all of his life, and whose final saying was the saying of Imam al-Hussein, someone like me does not give allegiance to someone like him. The night that takes him as its subject is session 14. Tonight he is named with us in passing. And peace be upon the young men of the resistance. Peace be upon Shaheed Mohsen Hojaji, the Hujjat Khuda, God's proof before everyone's eyes. Peace be upon the wider defenders of the holy shrines, the Mudafi'an Haram, the Iranian young men who left their homes for the shrines of Sayyid Zainab and Sayyid Ruqayya, the Afghan of the Fatimiyun division, the Pakistani Zainabiyun brigade, the Iraqi Hashd al-Sha'bi, the Lebanese resistance, the Syrian defenders, the medics in Gaza, the Sunni families like the family in Bukamal or in Sinjar, who were present at our 7th night. The children of Minab, the 168 young souls of one Iranian town. Every young man and every young woman of the resistance who took his father's place and his grandfather's burden in his hands. And peace, O God, upon the master of witnesses, Hussein ibn Ali, upon his brother al-Hassan al-Mushtaba, and upon their father Ali ibn Abi Talib, the commander of the faithful, and their mother, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, the daughter of the Prophet, and all of the Imams of guidance, all the way to the Imam of our age, may our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return. And peace be upon the women of the household, Sayyidah Khadija, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, Sayyidah Zainab, Sayyidah al-Baneen, Sayyidah Layla, the wife of Imam al-Hussein, Sayyidah Ruqayya, Sayyidah Rabab. And tonight especially, peace and blessings be upon Sayyidah Rabab, the wife of Imam Hussein, the mother of Sukaina and the suckling infant, the woman who heard her husband write love poetry about her and who would not move from his grave for a year. The unnamed women of the household, whose names the chronicles did not preserve, peace and blessings be upon them all. And peace, O God, upon the suckling infant, Ali al-Asghar, Abdullah ibn al-Hussein, the witness no counterfeiter can steal. The arrow took your throat, the sky caught your blood, the father's hands buried what your mother could not be there to bury. O God, we pray to you for Imam Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei, the new Wali al-Faqih. Preserve him, strengthen him, guide him, make him the leader that he was trained to be, until the Imam of our age returns and the line he carries is handed back to its rightful holder. O God, hasten the return of the Imam of our age. Make us of his helpers. Make us of his soldiers. Make us of those who, when he calls, are already standing. O God, we have nowhere to go but to you, and no one to ask but you, and no words except the ones that you have placed on the tongues of your friends. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We belong to God, and to him is our return. And we repeat your promise, an eternal promise for justice and a warning for the wrongdoers. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. And the wrongdoers will soon know at what goal they will end up. And we add from the depths of everything that we have learnt tonight, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. God is sufficient for us, and he is the best of guardians. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. Wa akhiru da'wani alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.